The Nigeria Labour Congress, that's the NLC, has described as insensitive and callous for the federal government to propose a 40% hike in electricity tariff from July 1. The NLC says with the contemplation of payment of school fees in tertiary institutions and increases in privately owned ones, in addition to other costs and tariffs on the way, life in Nigeria could become much more difficult. In a statement by its president, Joe Ajero, the NLC advised the federal government to shelve the proposed tariff hike in the collective safety of the masses. The NLC contends that there have been increases without notice in violation of statutes.
At this time, we're joined by the president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Comrade Joe Ajero. Comrade, thank you for joining us on Newsnight.
Right, we may have audio challenges with Joe Ajero there. As soon as we can fix that, we'll definitely...
Okay,
he's fine?
okay, it's
great.
fine now.
Super.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. Now, make known to us your position on the electricity tariff, because the companies making complaints that they have challenges they're facing too. They're saying inflation, high inflation is pushing them to raise the tariff and it's to serve the populace better. What do you make of this?
Well, that is a very wrong assumption, although it is not new. In the tariff order, multi-year tariff order, they had three assumptions, to consider in the increase in tariff, or its adjustment, as they may like to use. That is what they call upward adjustment. To that extent, they looked at the issue of inflation. They looked at the issue of the devaluation of the currency. And then those are some of the assumptions they looked at to increase, tariff. And you look at whenever inflation goes high, they increase tariff. Increase in tariff equally creates inflation. And then it became a vicious circle that continues to grow from time to time, which happened to be a very wrong one. If they increase it now, even with the increase in the pump price of petroleum products, and then you increase tariff again, there will be another inflation, which they will turn back to claim that there's inflation. Meanwhile, their increase, had equally led to increase in tariff. So that is a wrong way of deciding the mode or the model or the option to be adopted in adjustment of tariff. I think it's not sustainable, because this will not be the end. If the prices of commodity in the market skyrockets again, they will adjust tariff again. If it comes down, they are not, apart from once they just played on our psyche that they reduce tariff, they don't bring tariff down, and this will just lead to nowhere.
Right. Well, it does seem from all indication that with the planned 40% increase in electricity tariff, or subsidy as far as electricity is concerned, will be removed. Well, the federal government says presently it's spending about 50 billion naira every month on electricity tariff. Don't you think that this increase is justifiable considering the economic situation? Of course, the government says Nigerians need to, make some sacrifices in the meantime, that it may get worse before it gets better.
Well, the federal government allusion that they are spending 50 billion, I'm not here to doubt it, but I'm here to say that electricity, especially the discos, have been privatized, to the private sector. So what is government doing in another person's business? Because the mantra they have been proposing is that government has no business in business. So why are they subsidizing Mr. Ajero and Mr. John's business? So it is laughable and it's so scandalous if after privatization of electricity and handing it over to the private sector and the federal government say they are subsidizing it. That wasn't the impression we were giving. We were giving the impression that government had no money, that the private sector had a lot of money, to handle electricity distribution, generation, and transmission. And they sold it to individuals. So why are they spending 50 billion monthly? I don't understand the calculation.
So, well, I know in the past, Labour, indeed, I mean, the legislature at some point or the other actually called for a review of the privatization. Let's stay on that a bit. Where does the NLC stand on that right now, considering the fact that Nigerians continue to pay for darkness?
Well, the assumption they gave to Nigerians before privatization, because I was at the head of it as the General Secretary of the National Union of Electricity Employees. For over 10 years, we tried to explain to them that for an underdeveloping country, you don't come up with privatization. For a country where there is no availability, for a country where there is no accessibility, for a country where you can't situate affordability, that Nigeria was not ripe for privatization. But some of them decided to go ahead with it. And then they had about 3 assumptions, the issue of technical competence, managerial ability, and FDI, which they say were the basis for them to privatize. And if you look at all this, there was nothing that they brought in. There was no technical competence. There was nobody that was running electricity privately that they handed over to. So no managerial ability. On the issue of foreign direct investment, FDI, which they deceived Nigerians that it was to bring in FDI. There was no $1 that came into the economy of Nigeria. They rather borrowed money from Nigerian banks, which created, liquidity. And today, as we talk, about 6 or 7 companies, discos, have been seized by banks where they borrowed money. So when they borrowed money from Nigerian banks, to buy Nigerian electricity companies, and the thing has created a lot of problem. Whether Abuja electricity, whether Benin electricity, whether Ibadan electricity, whether Port Harcourt electricity, whether Kaduna or Kano, have been taken over by banks, and banks don't have the competence, to run electricity industry in Nigeria. So I think if they are thinking of how to fix the sector, we may come back to the drawing board.
Okay, Comrade Ajero, let me take you back to your comment on the fact that Nigeria is not ripe yet for privatization. Are you bothered that the government may not be able to hold the private company accountable, because this is one of the disadvantages of privatization? What are your expectations on accountability?
Well, my fears borders on the fact that it appears that the sellers are the buyers, because as at now it is not clear. The privatization was shrouded in secrecy. It is not clear who are the owners of these companies. And if that is the case, because in the last how many years they have pumped in about 2 trillion into the sector. Now if you sell, because the whole entire NEPA was sold for about 400 billion. And the Nigerian state pumped in about 2 trillion into that sector. And that's prodigal economy. Nobody does that. You sell your house for 20 million and you give the buyer 40 million to paint it. It doesn't follow. So it doesn't show the sign of a Nigerian state that has the capacity, to maintain sanity. In all the agreements reached, even there is still part of the payment of workers' entitlement that has not been concluded. The 10% equity shareholding for the workers, which the BPE is supposed to bring up, is not there. And the 40% government ownership in the company, no one naira profit or dividend has been declared in the last 10 years. And then you say the government cannot manage it. They can't even bring them, into accountability. For 8 years, I was asking the Buhari government, what is their policy on electricity? Because it was the Jonathan government that privatized. And there was no policy on it. And I'm still watching to see how this present government, will handle this, because it's too early to say.
And let me take you up on, your point. You're asking the federal government to reverse or shelve the proposed hike in electricity prices. And you also note that in previous times, the government has increased electricity tariff without, Nigerians even being aware of it. So what does the NLC plan to do in these two situations? If government does not reverse the planned electricity hike, what then?
Well, unfortunately, even under Fashola, I met with him once at a public hearing where he said that the law said they should only consult, but the law didn't say who they should consult. And I retorted, okay, go ahead and consult your family. And people were laughing. Now, they had written an NLC a letter now for consultation, probably in 2 weeks' time. And by that time, they would have effected this. And that will amount to abortion before pregnancy. Now, the issue is that the consultation is just mere, to fulfill all righteousness. They want to consult Nigerians and other stakeholders that they're increasing tariff. And in fact, under the arrangement, the minister still has the right, because the power sector is still not totally, especially the discos where the government still has 40%, and the transmission where they have still 100%. The minister can still intervene, with an order, to reverse what NEC is doing. It is not totally, the market dynamics that is driving it. But if they refuse, the NLC will still meet by its organs and decide what to do. But you can see that this is too hard for us to bear. We are trying to address the issues coming out from the PMS, increase in pump price of PMS. And all of a sudden, I think the government should be sensitive to know that when you increase these two areas, Nigerians will be in trouble.
Comrade Ajero,
right.
It's important to appreciate your insight tonight. But before we let you go, what are your recommendations if you do not support the increase in electricity tariff? What are your recommendations to make it really work?
Well, I think we need to come back to, to look at the tariff methodology. If we look at the tariff methodology, if it is a service reflective tariff, if it is not a cost reflective tariff, then we can get something. For instance, you have not metered the sector, and then you want to do a tariff based on estimation. For somebody who does not even get 4 hours supply a day, what is the essence of tariff increase? So we need to consciously look at the issue of service reflective tariff. If you give me for 20 hours, I pay for 20 hours. If you give me for 3 hours, I'll pay for 3 hours. There are communities for the past 1 month. They have not seen even a flash of electricity. And at the end of the month, they send, bills to them because they have not been metered. And meter is not rocket science. Even some Nigerian companies are equally on now producing meters. And then there is no commodity, including gari and rice, in the market that doesn't have a cup to measure it. So why will you give me a bill when there is no measure? So ordinarily, they should have concluded the assignment of metering every house in Nigeria before going into the issue of tariff adjustment.
Comrade Ajero, before we let you go again, the discos have always insisted that cost-reflective tariff or nothing, that without cost-reflective tariff, a pipe dream is what electricity supply availability would continue to be in Nigeria.
Yeah, you have cost-reflective tariff, but we are saying that it should be service-reflective tariff. If your cost is 2 billion, you don't turn it on me if you don't give me service, cumulatively that is not equal to 2 billion. That cost-reflective tariff is a serious cheat on Nigerians if it is not metered. I'm saying it even if you are talking of increase in tariff now and it is not metered. In fact, 80% or 60% of houses in Nigeria don't have this prepaid meter. And even the prepaid meters are adjusted in such a way that the rate at which they run in most instances, the regulatory agency like NEMS or whatever, they are not taking care of the prepaid meters. and the rate at which they run is unimaginable. So if you don't bring sanity into the level, and there is no metering process, now why do you now charge me cost? The cost they are talking of is that some of their MDs and general managers are earning billions. The cost of their car, the cost of their maintenance, the cost of their families, that's the cost they are talking of. And I want to depend on service you render to me. So we need to strike a balance on this.
So much. Joe Ajero is president of the Nigeria Labour Congress. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight tonight.